Do you remember when you downloaded that language learning app for like the 9th time, convinced this was the year you'd finally become fluent in the language? And then weeks turned to months, and months turned to years, and then you're nowhere closer than you were. I get it. 1 year ago today, I could barely string together a sentence in my target language.
Ja, het was een ervaring omdat we samen niet Nederlands gesproken hebben. Heel blij om mijn bureau op te...
Maar nu doe ik alles in het Nederlands. En hoe is het gebeurd? Daar ga ik je vandaag allemaal vertellen. If you're here, it's because you really want to unlock an international life. You really want to learn language. And it's hard because there's so much information out there, which is why I'm making this video of all of the things that I actually did in the last 12 months to become fluent quicker than I've ever learned another language. I believe in you. You can do it too. Dus, let's go.
Hi.
Hallo.
Het is zo lang geleden. Nu spreek ik Nederlands.
Ja.
Hoe gaat het met uw reis en alles en uw leven?
Zo'n grote vraag.
Ja.
Damn.
Vertel alles.
Now you're probably thinking these two girls have known each other for years.
Ik heb ook zoveel vragen voor jou.
But you're wrong, because only a few months ago I could not even string together a sentence. And now, as you can see, Esther has become a good friend. I can't talk about language fluency without telling you about today's sponsor, Preply, which is a huge secret as to how I've been able to become fluent so quickly in many languages, not just Dutch. Preply is an online platform that connects you to tutors around the world for various different languages. You can actually choose the different dialects by filtering out countries. You can filter the price point that you want to pay. You could filter out the schedule that you need, and everything is custom to you. This is one-on-one tutoring, and so you create your own learning plan with your teacher. During the lessons, I'm just having a good old chat with my tutor here, Esther, but as you can see, she sends corrections in the chat and we end up catching up, having a blast, and also I do learn my Dutch. Click the link in the description box to get 50% off your first lesson on Preply today. I found some really dope teachers, and I'm sure you will too. And here are the rest of my tips for how to get really fluent really fast. Daily habits is something that I feel like comes with resistance because we don't want to do stuff every day. Doing something every day is like, but I think once you get over the you can just embrace it. For the first 3 months of my journey, I would do the low-hanging fruit every day, which is important, and maybe you're here. I would do the apps, I would do the word matches, and feel like I was learning. If you're only sticking to the gamified apps, not to say like stop doing it, but just know that that has a time window, and the sooner you get out of that window, the faster you will actually learn. So first 3 months, gamified apps, that was my daily habit. After that, I started reading in Dutch, and I started reading with readers, which are basically intro level books for language learners specifically. Some people recommend children's books, which I've done in the past, or like comic books, but I find that it's not as effective because children's books and comic books, they aren't gonna give you language that you could use as an adult right away. So I read readers. And the first reader that I started with was also ridiculous but funny, Dracula. And it was tough. It was tough. Dracula is not an easy story to swallow in my opinion. It's not the kind of reading that I want to do in my real life. So I made the mistake of reading it in Dutch, which made it harder, but I was reading nonetheless. So then like month 4, 5, and 6, I started reading. Then I started getting smarter about what I was reading. I started reading things I actually would read in my regular life, just translating it in Dutch. So I signed up for an easy read newspaper with Belgian news. And now this is something that I have access to living in the country where the language is spoken, but it is also something you could do no matter where you live. You can find news outlets in your target language and use those apps instead of the apps from your native language. When you find a news outlet, the language level is going to be very intense, which is why if you can find a news outlet that designs its news specifically for learners, that's the win-win. So from once a week reading the Belgian newspaper for like easy read, I downloaded a news app, and then I started following the accounts on Instagram, and then next thing you know, I'm reading captions on my phone as I'm toggling on my GSM. Across the board, what's been cool in the year is seeing the daily habits evolve from gamified apps to full-blown reading news and having my entire world be crafted to be in Dutch. And now, reading is still one of my daily habits, but it's on my e-reader, and I read stationsromannetjes, aka like rom-com books in Dutch. So before bed, I look forward to reading this. That is the power of habit. Super important, do something daily, and also let that habit evolve and show you that it can become something new. Let's talk about intermediate plateaus. This is actually a crazy concept because for me, it wasn't so much much an intermediate plateau as much as it was a I am failing at this plateau. I was doing so much the first 6 months. I was doing all of my apps. I was doing my Dracula reading. I was journaling in my target language, and it just didn't seem to work. And the reason is because I was getting a lot of input, but I wasn't really outputting. And so even when I tried to write a sentence or when I tried to speak a sentence, it just wasn't working. And what was even worse is I was living here in Belgium, but people here speak exceptional English, which makes learning a language impossible. And you might feel this if you're living abroad or even traveling and people hear its tiniest accent in your, attempt to speak to them in their language and they switch to you in English. That became my plateau. It was so impossible to break through. I could read, I could understand, I could even listen and understand, but when it came to speaking, I was blocked, geblokkeerd, until, and this is very important, this changed the game for me, until I got a coffee with someone who did not want to speak any English. And this was painful for me because I was like, but the fourth time that we got together, because we were doing these lunch and less, it was my schoonmoeder, my mother-in-law. She was like, Joe, je zit niet verplicht om Nederlands te spreken, dus dat gaat onmogelijk zijn. If you're not obligated to speak the language, it's going to be impossible for you to learn quickly. And so I put myself in this false state of obligation where I was speaking to her and we both knew that I couldn't switch to English. That was how I got over the intermediate, I'll never be able to learn this plateau. It saved me a lot of time. I could have just stayed in my safety of doing all of my work on my own and never pushing myself past that comfort zone. But the minute I did, and the minute that I got through my begon ik eindelijk Nederlands te spreken. I briefly paused today's video to tell you that if you're not already on my newsletter, I'd love to have you. I send out weekly newsletters, and there's specifically a language learning toolkit that is totally free. You can download it on the newsletter list. I would love to have you there because we're talking about global things. I'm sharing updates about my life here abroad. You'll be a part of a global-minded community of people who want to expand their life one language at a time. Click in the description box below or scan the QR code to get the language learning goodies. Now back to the video. Hot take on this, vocab. Let's talk about vocab. I don't believe you should learn random loose vocab words. It's just not how our brains work. I learned all my vocab by reading the news and reading things and absorbing it and listening to people who speak it and listening to podcasts. I've never, ever in my life found success in reading aimless vocab words. So in my opinion, when it comes to vocab, don't actually focus on it. Focus on context and chunks instead of random vocab words. You will learn your vocab as long as you're absorbing different materials. And so if I'm reading the news, I'm learning obviously more elevated vocab. If I'm reading a stationsromannetje about a dramatic girl who is in a toxic relationship, I'm gonna learn bad relationship vocab. Also very useful, especially if you're Latina and spicy like me. If I am listening to a podcast about beter tips voor een beter leven by Evie Grijard, I'm gonna learn about self-development vocab. Having a diverse set of things that you absorb is going to elevate your vocab. No vocab list is gonna do it for you. Consuming things will. It's a hot take. I'm coming for y'all productivity bros. Let's talk grammar. Grammar is really important. We all know a language cannot be learned without grammar, except that's wrong. That's wrong. Babies don't learn grammar. And so when you're learning a language, if you want to think about how human brains acquire language, grammar is not so important. However, I'm not ignorant to the fact that we are adults with brains that can work faster if we know rules to things, if that's how your brain works. I've always approached language grammar last, but in Dutch, I had to change that up because the grammar was so different from my actual native languages, which means grammar sucked for me in Dutch. And that was actually one of my most difficult things to overcome. It's like, hoe werkt de damn woordvolgorde? Like, the woordvolgorde kan ik niet. I had this grammar book and I just basically cracked it open, and every weekend I would spend maybe an hour looking at these different grammatical concepts in Dutch, which isn't how most people learn language, and I'm not saying that this is how you gotta learn it, but because I didn't do an intensive cursus, I didn't do like a legitimate course where they tell you step by step how grammar works, I had to have a little bit of that structure myself. And then the most helpful thing with grammar was finding what I was struggling with, and I still have to do this. Again, I'm not done learning Dutch. Like, er zijn verschillende foutjes dat ik altijd maak, maar I can go in and like laser drill on my issues. So going into the trouble spots, and the hardest thing for me was with Bayesian sentences. So when the verb goes from subject, verb, object to subject, object, verb. What I'm trying to say is grammar isn't that important, but if you're learning a language whose grammar is completely off from your own, you will need to laser focus on the vouchers. And the more you do that, the easier and faster it'll be for you to learn, but only if you apply it to spoken practice. Because there was also a moment in the first 7 months where I finally understood, in theory, where verbs go, but when I was speaking, it didn't come as naturally. Like logically, I knew, but in the gesprek, I didn't know. The more you say the same things over and over again, the easier it gets. So you just like lock in the phrase as opposed to grammar, and that's when you know you're really learning. Let's talk immersion. Now, immersion is not only for flights and taking plane tickets to live in the country. For me, what made the difference was finding a show with many, many seasons that was very dramatic and that I liked. And the more I watched without English subtitles. There were no English subtitles. Dus ik was verplicht om Nederlands te begrijpen because otherwise I wouldn't understand the show. The show was really important because the body language of the actors allowed me to understand what was happening even if I had to pause every 2 seconds to actually translate the subtitles in Dutch. So immersion is no more than watching a show every night. Immersion is what are you wasting time doing in your regular life? Can you make it a useful thing by doing it in a target language? That's basically immersion. And that's a hot take because a lot of people will say that they don't have time, and I'll say, you do have time. You do probably listen to podcasts. You do listen to music. Translate that shit. Just translate it. And of course, sometimes it feels like work. If it feels like work, you're not gonna wanna do it consistently. And this is why you really have to find something you genuinely wanna watch, something you look forward to reading, something you look forward to listening to. Otherwise, it's gonna be mandatory and an obligation is never good for your vibes. Motivation's tough. Let's talk about motivation. Ik ben niet altijd gemotiveerd. Ik heb niet zoveel energie en nu ben ik een oudere vrouw. Honestly, I feel my energy slipping away and it's tough. Like it's damn hard to put yourself out there and it's hard to practice the language, especially when people easily switch to English. For me, the motivation is, can I let people be who they want to be in their language? Can I understand who they are in their language? So when I lost motivation, which happened a lot, I would always think like, what am I doing this for? I'm doing this so that I can walk into a room and everyone continues to speak Dutch and they don't have to bend over backwards and speak in English for me. And when I started to see that happening, the motivation grew because it has been a consistent struggle. Like I have really been trying to learn this language and only in the last 2 months of this journey has it been so fluent, has it been so easy. If I could start this 1-year language journey all over again to be more efficient, to do things smarter, to learn this language faster, I would think of it in small baby steps as opposed to needing to do everything all at once. I would really set goals to do 30 minutes a day, and in the beginning, setting a timer. Set a timer for 30 minutes a day, and it doesn't matter what you do in those 30 minutes, but as long as your brain is being flooded with that language and you're massaging it day after day, 30 minutes will compound into a language fluency like you never expected. And also, I feel like I would up the ante on the spice level of things. So starting with the first 3 months of just tuckling on the apps to get your brain primed, if that is what works for you. Then the next 3 months, how do you level up everything that you're consuming? Feeling it out, like knowing that, okay, this is getting a little too easy, I'm getting a little bored, how can I spice this up? Ultimately, the one thing that's gotten me fluent was speaking after consuming all of the content that I had consumed. I don't think I would be able to do my life here in Dutch had I not pushed myself out of my comfort zone and created an environment where I was verplicht om Nederlands te spreken. En ja, 1 year later, ik heb heel veel dingen geleerd en ik voel me echt thuis. So it's not impossible, even when it feels like it is. You can do it too. Don't forget to book your classes with your Preply tutor. 25 minutes will make a huge difference. Check the description box as well. And let me know what language you're learning and what's your greatest language learning hack. Have you learned a language from scratch? And if so, what were your best tips? Dus tot de volgende update video. Thank you for being here. Ik ben blij om hier te zijn met jullie. En misschien ga ik een Nederlandse vlog doen in de straatjes van Antwerpen.